one of the great gentlemen of our theatre. And I'm going to start by reading a little piece that he wrote, but I should warn you first that at about 1 o'clock, possibly before we've quite finished, the RAF Red Arrows are going to be doing a flying past.
Yes, of course.
Just a little extra something we laid on for you. So we'll incorporate that. But I'll start by reading a little piece from what would have been the 3rd volume of Michael's memoirs. The first volume was published and is indeed available at the bookshop.
Of course.
And the second is ready for publication, and he's just begun the 3rd. And this is an excerpt, it's Michael's account of the first West End show that he ever saw. And it was a play called Knight of the Garter, Knight without a K, and here's the evidence. March 1933, written in Michael's careful handwriting at the top. And this is what he says about it. The first play I saw in London was a farce at the Strand Theatre, with a very popular actor, Sidney Howard, heading the cast, playing Roderick Bodger, the butler. The setting of the first act was described in the programme as the lounge hall. On stage right were 2 doors, the front door and the door to the servants' quarters. Over on stage left was a long flight of stairs leading to a landing which extended along the length of the upstage wall. Off this landing were 2 rooms, while in the centre of the landing, against the balustrade, was an occasional table on which there was a telephone. The curtain rose, revealing an empty stage. After a few moments, the telephone rang, not the impersonal, regular, modern call, but 2 or 3 sharp, imperious rings that demanded instant attention. Out of one of the landing rooms emerged Sidney Howard. He ignored the urgency implicit in the telephone bell, but walked slowly to the table and picked up the receiver. "Yes, sir," he said. After a brief pause, "You wish to be woken at 8 o'clock with tea." Another pause. "Yes, sir. The morning papers." "Ah, the Times and the Morning Post." "Yes, of course, sir. Goodbye, sir." Gravely, he put the receiver on its rest and very slowly walked downstairs. Without a word, he reached the lounge hall, and with a measured pace, he crossed the entire width of the stage, heading for the green baize door. As he put his hand out to push the swing door open, he paused for a fraction before saying, "I wonder who that was." The door swung shut behind him. Even at that age, I appreciated not only Sidney Howard's timing, but the daring of making the audience wait so long for the laugh line on his exit. It was that evening which confirmed what I've been dreaming since I saw my first production at 8 years of age. As soon as possible, I would make a career for myself in the theatre. This seems to be completely characteristic of Michael, not only because of his photographic memory of the set. He can no doubt have taken me through budgeting and construction of it as well, but because the career that then unfolded, first of all in stage management, and then of course in production, and at the highest levels of administration, but never, except for a tiny moment right at the beginning as an actor, was nevertheless inspired by his love of what actors can do. And that, of course, makes him a very precious man indeed. I don't think any of us who knew him or had dealings with him, perhaps as part of his magnificent diagrams and boxes and arrows and 3 colours of ink in this building, could fail to be grateful for his loyalty and his affection and his belief in actors. I know that I had great cause for thanks to him for his loyalty over the years at many critical junctures in my working life. We can't forget that any more than we can forget the sweetness of his smile and that particular light, merry tonality of his laughter. Can I ask Bill Gaskell to come and speak?
I've known Michael in at least 3 of the major parts of his career. In the early days of the Royal Court, the theatre was never dark. On Saturday night, the curtain would come down, when there was a curtain, which there was then, and the set would be struck. The new set would be put up. It would be late during the night. The next day would be the technical. And if you were lucky, you had a run on Monday afternoon, but frequently you didn't. On Monday night, there was a dress rehearsal. But the dress rehearsal was public. That is, pre. And before the show, Michael, who had worked through 2 days, 2 nights, would appear immaculately dressed and crave our indulgence for what we were about to see. So in fact, the very first person to walk on the stage at the Royal Court under the regime of George Devine was Michael. And I didn't work there till almost a year later, though I got to know this figure from these appearances very well. And he was, of course, the stage director. And my first production was John Osborne's first early play, Epitaph for George Dillon. And we had a kind of success with it. And it went to New York. But the producer, Josh Logan, said we should take all our props with us because we wouldn't find anything like that in New York. So Michael packed up everything very, very carefully. And they all arrived in New York. And the American stage management were enormously impressed with the care of this, and about the fact that he'd done drawings of the place setting of the table in each act so that they could know exactly what to do. Quite remarkable. Soon after leaving the court, Peter Hall asked me to work at Stratford. And very nervous, I was to direct Christopher Plummer and Edith Evans in Richard III. Michael was already installed at Stratford, and he had persuaded Edith that she wouldn't mind living in a workman's cottage. Nobody quite knows how he did it, though I think he describes it in his book. But it was one of his major achievements. And he and I was very, very nervous, and he and Elizabeth asked me to spend Sunday with them the day before rehearsal. I shall never forget that kindness and that generosity and that warmth which supported me. So through my life, Michael has reappeared, firm as a rock, reassuring, sometimes rather patronizing, because he'd known me as a very young man. And, but he was lovely. And then when I came back to here, to the National, well, back to the Old Vic, after being away, there he was again. And I'm sure Peter will tell you more about that. Thank you.
Hello, I'm sure Michael would have been thrilled with this cast list. I'm sure we all have our memories of Michael, and I was searching back through my mind because I've known him for about 30-something years. And this particular one was in 1973, when I was appearing in Peter Nicholls' National Health at the Old Vic. Between the shows on a Saturday, I was arrested for shoplifting in Beavers in Kensington while trying to buy a trouser suit for a film interview on the Monday. I ended up having a trial at the Old Bailey a year later. Maureen Lipman came as my character witness, and Michael represented Larry as my employer. He brought a letter from Larry, which was read out to the court. It basically said that as I was rather scatty, the circumstances of the case were of no surprise to him whatsoever. That description balanced with Michael's testimony of my hard-working, total commitment to the job, made sure that I was acquitted. And I shall never cease to be grateful to them both. Sunny Amy, who now lives in New Zealand, sent me this to read to you all. Michael Halifax was a perceptive, gentle gentleman, but he had plenty of mettle when necessary. His influence in the theatre is worldwide. In 1959, he was my first guide and mentor at the Royal Court Theatre. His meticulous planning, attention to detail, and regard for people, particularly actors, were an inspiration for my many years in professional theatre. We also worked long hours together in the early days of the National Theatre. He was fun to be with, and we had a lot of laughs. The profession owes him a great deal. I am with him and with you in spirit today. Sunny Amy in New Zealand. Judi Dench was supposed to come and say a few words today, but unfortunately she had to go to Cornwall. So she has sent this rose for me to give to Elizabeth. Where are you? What is it? Sorry, I should have said this first. This is her message. Thinking of Michael today, with love from Finty and Judy. Oh.
For many stage managers of my generation, Michael was our role model. As well as being legendarily good at his job, he had those wonderful personal qualities which distinguished him from the rest. He had dignity without pomposity, efficiency with humanity, patience up to a point, and a great capacity for seeing the joke. Ernest Hemingway defined courage as grace under pressure. If he really wanted to see grace under pressure, he should have watched Michael as a company manager on tour. The first overseas tour I did with him was the All-Male As You Like It company in 1968. The British Council, in its infinite wisdom, decided we should take the production with Ralph Coltye's steel and plastic set, and Ralph, I'm happy to say, is with us here today, to Stockholm, Copenhagen, Belgrade, and Venice in 2 weeks. The company comprised 33 male actors, 5 male musicians, 3 male members of stage management, a male lighting designer, 3 male crew members, and a wardrobe mistress. Stockholm passed without incident, but before the last performance in Copenhagen, the Carlsberg Brewery invited the company to lunch. This consisted of 12 courses, each course accompanied by a different lager from the vaults, and ending with a 14-verse song, local etiquette requiring that each verse be followed by a small glass of aquavit. To watch Michael ensuring that all 40 singers got back on the bus to the hotel was like watching a very superior version of One Man and His Dog in Fluent Danish. We left Denmark for Yugoslavia, where we landed in Dubrovnik, only to discover that one member of the company had managed to leave his passport in a Copenhagen brothel. The Yugoslav police refused to allow him entry, whereupon the rest of this band of brothers, and one sister of course, decided they would not proceed without him. Again, to watch Michael dealing with stern-faced commissars with infinite patience, and as far as we knew, no Serbo-Croat at all, was to watch a master at work. We were only 9 hours behind when we got to Belgrade, where we were welcomed by Yugoslav maidens handing us red roses, by now considerably wilted. The actors, of course, were allowed to go to bed, while the rest of us got on with the fit-up. All was going well until it was decided that the white raked floor, by now a bit grubby, should be touched up with the special quick-drying paint that Paint Frame supplied us with. By the half, it was very apparent that it wasn't
going to. Somehow, Michael, by now we assume fluent in Serbo-Croat, persuaded a motley collection of locals to scour the streets of Belgrade for the local equivalent of Turps. While the rest of us rubbed vigorously, Michael charmed the Minister of Culture, the Mayor of Belgrade, and assorted dignitaries front of house. We were only half an hour late going up. Our last night in Belgrade was spent with the local actors in a club, where many toasts of friendship were drunk in slivovitz, which tasted very much like the stuff we used to take the paint off. As we drove at dusk into Venice, I heard Michael patiently explaining to a concerned Frank Wiley that they hadn't had floods, it always looked like this. On to the beautiful Fenice Theatre. As we watched the elements of Ralph's set being winched up from the canal, I was amazed to see that Michael merely gave a rather long blink as a huge chunk of Ralph's steel and plastic crashed into the murky canal. Presumably in Michael's fluent Italian, drivers were instructed and the missing piece eventually arrived. We spent the night catching quick naps in the boxes of that glorious theatre, listening to Michael trying to dissuade the Italian stagehands from trying to nail the plastic onto the steel. When we left Venice, the company was in some disrepair. Fatigue, breakdowns, colds, flu, the journey home was not all fun. Michael, however, was his usual immaculate and cheerful self, looking forward to next week. We were playing the Sunderland Empire.
Such was the range of Michael's responsibilities as company administrator when we moved into this building that there was a young actor who was thinking of writing a murder mystery set inside the National Theatre against the backdrop of the chaos of colonising this building, and came to the conclusion that only Michael could be the murderer, because only he could get away with it. He once appeared at a board meeting with a piece of paper this long, with the entire year's schedule on it, and it was full of crosses, emblems, hieroglyphics, every highliner, every sort of mark. And Harris Burtwhistle picked it up and said, "I know some people who can play this." I first encountered Michael on tour. My very first show as a company manager on the road was Mater Barbara in Aberdeen. And I thought I was doing quite well. And he appeared one evening after the show in the company office, rather concerned that I was neglecting the theatre manager because I hadn't been having little chats with him during the performance at all for that week. And he thought I should have been. And I pointed out that it was a technical show and I really couldn't be spared from backstage. And he understood this. But it actually showed his concern. One of the things he cared passionately about was the reputation of the National Theatre on tour, its regard for good relations with the theatres that we were playing. And he was quite right, except I was slightly bemused by the fact that I was being taken gently to task for not spending the entire show exchanging theatrical gossip over free scotch in the Stalls bar, which is not a thing I would normally shrink from in horror. But I did take his point. I took his point very clearly. And there's a lovely story which I owe to Matthew Scott about Michael on tour. It was a show that I was on, but I don't remember it. I wasn't there when it happened. And we opened a Peter Wood production on the Razzle at the Lyceum in Edinburgh during the festival. And we were all invited to the Lord Provost's reception after the first performance. And there was a coach outside the stage door. Michael was the first there, checking people off as they got on. And the coach was about 3/4 full. And suddenly, a drunk appeared, who could barely stand, staggered up and started to harangue the driver through the open door of the coach. So the driver closed the door, whereupon the drunk proceeded to beat on the windows with his fists. And then, as a grand finale, was violently sick down the side of the coach. Shocked silence inside. Michael obviously felt the ball was very much in his court now, and had to deal with it in some way and decided on humour. So he got up and he said, "I'm terribly sorry, ladies and gentlemen, but I never expected the Lord Provost would behave like this." Whereupon a lady at the back got up and strode off the coach in high dudgeon. That would be the Lady Provost. But it's the only occasion I can think of where Michael's famous oil on troubled waters turned out to be petrol. I was telling you because it was so rare. But he was a wonderful presence, especially on tour. I mean, the joy that we felt, you'd be there amid all the chaos and the fit-up, and this figure, this calm figure, soothing person who would come on the stage and say hello to everyone, and it was just wonderful. It was lovely. Thank you.
Well, my memories of Michael will always be of a very calm and well-organised person who managed to do so many different jobs with enormous ease. When he left the National Theatre, his workload was divided and taken over by several people who probably, like me, struggled even to do their bit. Michael's office here at the National Theatre has become legendary. When knocking on his door, you would hear the sound of pieces of paper being whisked away, so that when you entered the room, his desk was empty and his attention was on you. Likewise, when Michael came on tour with us, we would usually find a dressing room to turn into an office. This would be used by all the staff involved with the production, but Michael would take over a corner of the room, and despite the many distractions, still produce his perfect charts for the National Theatre repertoire. And we have found a few of Michael's original charts, which are on that board over there. I suppose that for all of us working in stage management, one of the best feelings was knowing that Michael understood our world, and he was there to help and guide us in his discreet and diplomatic way.
This is the second extract from Michael when he was 19 years old and was working in a job his father had arranged as a civilian clerk for the Hackney Police Force. It was by sheer chance that I saw it, a small item in the evening news, and the paper wasn't even mine. I was a firm believer in fate, and I was certain as soon as I read the few lines in the paper that they were going to prove to be a very important step on my way into the theatre. I read that 3 actors were to take over the King's Theatre in Hammersmith and present weekly repertory. The actors were Wilson Barrett, Esmond Knight, and Noel Howlett. I chose Noel Howlett, for I had recently seen him playing the father in a delightful comedy of middle-class life called George and Margaret. I felt certain the sympathetic character he portrayed was also his character in real life. So I wrote to him, pointing out that in my opinion, the new season stood very little chance of success unless he employed me. The reply came from Esmond Knight, saying that the company would be very happy for me to join their stage management team of 2, and I was welcome as soon as I could leave my present employer. There would be no salary. That was fantastically good news for me, for although the salary was a slight problem, my parents were consulted, my father came up to London to discuss the situation. The result was that I was allowed a year's probation, at the end of which my parents would decide whether I would be allowed to stay in the theatre or whether I returned to a safe job. I became call boy, maker of coffee for the company's mid-morning break, and the one who went on errands, which usually meant buying or borrowing props. I was also given wonderfully helpful lessons in stage management work and theatre law. I was soon allowed to prompt during rehearsals, then during the show. This I did not find easy. Indeed, one actor hissed at me as he made his exit past me, "Why didn't you prompt me sooner? You should have known I was going to try." Then came a visit by a reporter and photographer from the Daily Mail. The cast were very excited, and I was sent out all day on errands. I was not to know until the cast showed me the next day that Esmond Knight had spent most of the interview talking about me. The paper quoted him as saying, "I think Michael will be a big noise in the theatre one day." It may or may not have been a coincidence that a few days later, Wilson Barrett took me to see a rival show at the Chelsea Palace. During the interval, he turned to me and said, "Teddy and I are very pleased with you, and we would like to offer you a salary. Would you accept 10 shillings a week?" Which is how I managed to avoid working in a safe job all my life.
We have a little bonus. By some oversight that Michael Halifax would certainly not have put up with, I'm billed twice in this programme, and Edward Petherbridge not at all. So please, Ted.
I must keep this short. It's wonderful to have the light behind one. Years slip away. Talking of that, I was talking to my first wife the other day, who happens to be here from New Zealand, where I'm sure she knows Sunny Amy, and I suddenly remembered something from when I used to live in Peckham in 1966. I was carrying our little boy, who was then about three plus, across Highshore Road in Peckham, you know. And he suddenly said, "Michael Halifax." Which shows how he had become such parts of our life. I can see we're being looked at by somebody looking faintly like Laurence Olivier here. And Sir Lawrence and Michael had a great influence over all our lives at the Old Vic, of course. One never knew quite whether it was benign or not. I see from his book that he discussed everything: salaries, dressing rooms, casting, which is why I was kept on the top floor for months and months ago, and why I had to go on with a feather up my arse and brown bow in the Royal Under the Sun at Villa Umu for 4 years. They had to work out what they could get away with. Now I'm going to be on safer ground. I hope. This is an ode to Michael Halifax, to whom so much is owed. That's the first line. Trying to catch up. A man of memos and acquainted with everybody. We've all been on his lists, though list is something which he never did. Did he ever run aground, get lost in mist? However tempestuous the cast, his back remained as upright as a mast, and with whatever leaks he had to deal, he somehow always kept an even keel. With 1950s neat, short back and sides, his own unvarying brand of cool, however smooth, however rough the rides, he seemed of some old diplomatic school. But was this, after all, a quaint disguise? He'd pulled on hempen ropes up in the flies. Still higher, yet and even further hid, he'd crawled on dusty beams up in the grid. Up on your short a bit, down on your long, as familiar to him as love's old sweet song. I realized that line did not quite scan, but how contain the breadth and width and height of this enigmatic and extraordinary man? At planning, though so consummately gifted, he knew firsthand that scenes were what you shifted. His schedules, ad hominem, ad hoc, took care of actors, box office, and cramped Old Vic scene dock. In his book, his index lists the greater and the lesser. Bergman, Egmont. Berg, your land. And coming in between them alphabetically, you understand, is Betty, unhappy Vivian Drummond's new Britannia's dresser. In The Entertainer, thank the Lord High Chamberlain. Above him, in the index, Harry Lomax is slipped in. In Memory's index, Halifax, so slenderly he towers, we graced his lists. Oh, countless times. And Michael, dear Elizabeth, still remains on ours.
If it's possible, Michael and I, it is possible, fell in love over my fax machine, actually. Didn't we, Elizabeth?
We did indeed.
Some 15 years ago, through hundreds of faxes, he guided me in Chicago Shakespeare Theater through the various stages of its life. He shared his time, his knowledge, and most of all, he shared his family with me. I wanted to read you just a few little snippets of some of Michael's faxes to a young artistic director who actually needed his guidance very much. In 1995, written after I had faxed him the reviews of a Shakespearean tragedy I directed, by anyone's standard, it was a complete failure. He writes, "Very good to hear from you, but we were so sorry to hear that you had been badly let down by your leading man. There's not much one can do in a play such as that if the leading player is offbeat by a mile or two, except to cringe in a corner and hope that the weeks speed by quickly. There is also the desire I used to feel not to have to speak to people in case the subject just happened to raise its ugly head. Stay home." December 1995. This fax was sent upon the arrival of a surprise gift to Michael and Elizabeth, sent by a contingency of their Chicago fan club. "Last evening," he writes, "Peter Jones' van stopped outside the house, and we were presented with a neat but chubby parcel. For us, we asked, in that stupid way one adopts when such an unexpected occasion, and being told yes, we repaired and ran to the dining room to strip off the wrapping. 'It's a bread machine,' said Elizabeth incredulously, and sure enough there was this shiny bright white machine telling us it made bread. Elizabeth is busy in the kitchen now, but I'm hoping that I can put ingredients together soon. The next morning I get another fax that said, all it said was, 'Breakfast was bliss. Elizabeth says she wants to take the little machine to bed with her.'" 28th of September, 98, at the groundbreaking of our new theater on Navy Pier. "Very good luck on this groundbreaking, or water breaking. This evening we shall be thinking of you in your work clothes, digging away like mad. When after a few moments you have dug a hole the size of your new apartment, at the bottom of which the azure blue waters of the lake can be seen gently surging to and fro, you will know you have, for once, gone just too far." January 99, "My dear Barbara, and now for a tiny bit of quite useless information. On this day, I checked in for my very first day with a repertory company, my very first day in theater, in Hammersmith, 60 glorious years ago. Why should Queen Victoria be the only one to be able to have that phrase used about her diamond jubilee?" 15th of August, 1999. Our theater was about to go up on Navy Pier in about 10 months, the Chicago way. Very fast, but no coordination at all. I wrote to Michael in a panic after I discovered that the rails on the galley and the gallery were built too high for people to see over, and our stage was just a little bit slanted. "My dear Barbara, poor you. I have experienced the too high rail syndrome, but in the Littleton. We had too high a wall in the front of the circle. Dame Peggy sat in one of those seats very early on, and of course went immediately to Peter Hall and complained. There were general great discussions as to whether safety regulations would be infringed if this wall was lowered. In the end, it had to be. But at least I never had to deal with a slanted stage. Dangerous, I would think, with actors sliding down and disappearing over the edge. Which way did old Lear go, noble Kent? Well, he slid that away, my liege, and speed was drawing on him fast. Keep plugging away, lower the rails, and think how wonderful it will be when you move in. Very exciting, until you find out the door of your office won't close because the carpet bunches up, and if you switch on a lamp, another in the room next door goes out." This is a couple of days after September 11th. 01. Very, very far off B. I chanced to put on the television at 4 o'clock our time without having heard or seen any news, so the sight of the first one and then the other tower was absolutely, horrifyingly awful. All we trust now is that Bush and Blair don't go rushing around the world shooting off missiles just to show how strong they are. Why don't they examine what made these fanatics act the way they did, and then see whether the problems could be solved without starting wars everywhere? 10th of May, 2002. At this moment, I was deciding whether I was going to see Peter Hall's production of the Bacchae in Greece. So I wrote to Michael, and he writes back, "Wonderful girl. This letter was really to say that grandson Luke will be playing in West Side Story at the college in Chiswick on the 3rd of July. If there is a clash of dates between Chiswick and Epidaurus, seeing Luke as Ruth in West Side Story is far more important. Far more important than sitting on a stone seat with no back to it in a 2,000-year-old open-air theater somewhere out in the sticks of Greece watching an old Grecian pot boiler. Tons of love pouring out of an ancient Grecian urn, Michael Akakis." 3rd of August, 2007. He wasn't feeling very well last summer. Our dear amazing lady, I will just now set down a few snippets of life with the Halifaxes. Elizabeth is amazing, working so hard and always watching to see what she could do to save me from doing it. We had a shock after Luke had pruned the eucalyptus. Suddenly that beautiful mass of silver green leaves disappeared, and we were left with a tangle of bare branches. But a couple of weeks ago, Elizabeth showed me that almost the whole tree was a mass of little leaves. Wherever they could produce a bunch, there they were. Miraculous. And finally, on my birthday, last September, Wonder Girl #1. Very many happy returns of the day. Have a great day with everyone doing things for you rather than the other way around. We went to a celebration of Sir's 10th, held in the Olivier last Sunday. It was a great event with seats costing £250. Luckily, we were Nick Heidner's guests. We met many old friends there, which was so good. We hadn't seen Tony Harrison, for example, for some years. A long talk with Benjamin Whitrow, whose dupe in The Merchant I will always treasure. Of course, I appreciated his comment when, across a crowded foyer, the box office manager came to give me our tickets. "Gracious," I said, as I turned back after thanking the ticket bringer. "I only have to appear, and our tickets are given to us." "Quite right, too," said Ben. Someone else said that night, "I'm always surprised by you, Michael, and my wonder and respect grows each time we meet. You seem to have held together every major theater company since the 50s, which I thought, well, that was such a nice revelation to pass on to me. I'm off to hospital next week, so this will be my last email for some time." And it was.
I'm the coda, ladies and gentlemen. Practically everything that needed to be said has been said. Practically every emotion that we feel when celebrating this lovely friend, colleague and worker has been said. I have very few jokes. I have one mystery. One strange, strange mystery. Michael Halifax had the ability to be at the right place at the right time. The mystery is that nobody quite knows how he got there. At the end of the war, when he finished his military service, he moved with a kind of strange, sure-footed certainty to become employed by H.M. Tennants Limited, who were, at that point, the British Theatre, the best. But suddenly, he wasn't there anymore. He was in Stratford-on-Avon with Tony Quayle, making a new era in the fortunes of the Shakespeare Memorial Theatre. He hadn't been there very long when he reappeared in Sloane Square, where George Devine was doing something quite extraordinary in hallowing the writer again for the British Theatre. From there, suddenly he was at Stratford-on-Avon. Tony Quayle was no longer there. I was there, and he'd heard say that something was going to be made, a new form, and that was the Royal Shakespeare Company. Not long after the Royal Shakespeare Company was recognised, Sir Lawrence called him to the National, and off he went, and the National began. There he was in the centre. Years later, I appeared at the National, and who should I find there but Michael Halifax. Now, the mystery of all this is not that he could do the jobs. Very beautiful timing. The mystery is not that he could do these jobs, because he was, above all, whatever job he was doing, he was the arch diplomat. That is not the mystery. The mystery is how he moved from one of us to the other of us without anybody saying, "You can't leave now." He was immaculate. Immaculate in his dealings with actors, immaculate with his dealings with management. He was really a go-between and a great, great lover of theatre. It's wonderful to see so many of you here today. Ralph Coltire just said to me, "I had no idea that so many people who knew him were still alive." And with that positive, I leave you. Bless you, Michael.
Like the red and blue vapor trails, so much like Michael Halifax's coloured pens. Just a few thanks for everybody who's made today possible. To John Langley, Rosie Beattie and Wayne Harris, to Laura Benson, Hannah Wright, Jana Macklin, Anna Carteret, Richard Mangan, Lynn Hale, Michael Mayhew, all the speakers, of course, and of course to Nick Hyden and Nick Starr for the use of the hall. Over there is a video available of Michael talking to students, as well as the first volume of his memoirs, or downstairs perhaps. What Michael would much prefer me to draw your attention to is the groaning banquet on the other side. And as we get into our cups, if anybody should glimpse a tall, slim figure, immaculate, silver hair, a twinkle of mischief in his eyes, somewhere around there, I wouldn't be at all surprised. Thank you.